The House plans to hold a second speaker vote tomorrow. Ohio Congressman Jim Jordan is trying to win over multiple GOP lawmakers to become the next speaker. Several Republicans didn't vote for him in the first speaker vote. Former Speaker Kevin McCarthy and House Majority Leader Steve Scalise both got a handful of votes, among others. Robert Costa and Major Garrett join us now. Robert is CBS News Chief Election and Campaign Correspondent, and Major is CBS News Chief Washington Correspondent. And Bob, I want to start with you because I know we've been spending a lot of time in the basement of the Capitol together. You've been doing a lot of reporting on this speaker's race. Now that this vote is off for today, it appears, at what point might Jim Jordan throw in the towel, or does he continue to ride this out?
Nicole, we have just learned that Congressman Jordan has decided to spend the night trying to talk to these Republicans on the fence to get to that necessary 217 he needs to win the Speaker's gavel. Republicans will meet tomorrow morning ahead of the Speaker vote. They're going to have another vote tomorrow at 11 a.m. Jordan's going to a second ballot. But based on my conversations in the past hour, it's just not clear he's going to be able to get there. This is deeply personal for some members. They don't like how this process has played out. Now, I'm not sure for at least 5 to 8 of them if there's anything Jordan can say to get them over the line.
And I know, Major, you spoke with Congressman Jordan back in 2021 about the 2020 election. Want to take a look back at that interview?
Yeah. Can you be a conservative and disagree with the president about the 2020 election?
I don't think it's helpful. I think we should be focused on making sure that we have integrity in our elections going forward. That's what I've always said about. There are millions of Americans who have concerns about what happened in this last election. I've never said this election was stolen. All I've said is let's check it out.
So in terms of some of the opposition that Jim Jordan is facing, how much of his position with respect to the 2020 election and his role in January 6th, how much of that is a factor in this race?
It's a very big factor. And what you just heard is a convenient dodge. I've never said the election was stolen. We just need to check it out. Wait a minute. You were giving aid and comfort to those who were looking for ways before January 6th, a couple of days right before it, to try to subvert and overturn a verified, legally validated presidential election. And when Ken Buck of Colorado last week asked Steve Scalise and Jim Jordan to declare before the entire Republican conference that the election wasn't stolen, both of them refused to do so in unequivocal terms. So if Jim Jordan wants to be the Speaker of the House, he's going to have to come to terms with what happened in 2020 and do it more vocally and more emphatically than he has so far. I don't think he's willing to do that, and that's going to be one of many irritants. As Bob has pointed out, it's not the only irritant. There's several irritants, some of them personal, some of them policy, some of them political. But Jim Jordan did not expect to lose by 20 votes. Neither did people around him. 20 votes is not close. And if this vote tomorrow goes and he's not trimmed that by at least half, I don't see how he continues to go forward.
But Bob, you've been reporting, we're likely 10 to 20 holdouts. So is this really a big surprise?
It is a surprise because he had been putting a pressure campaign on over the weekend. But some members, especially traditional Republicans, those from swing districts, they have questions. To build on what Major just said, remember CBS News reported in early 2022 that on January 6, 2021, in the White House phone logs, which we've obtained, there's a 10-minute call between Jordan and Trump. And Jordan has never really gotten into the details of what did he say to Trump on that fateful day.
And he ignored a subpoena from the January 6th Select Committee, a legally binding subpoena, which has been adjudicated by all sorts of courts. He defied it. He defied a subpoena to testify about what he knew, what he did, what he didn't do. That's a big opening question here. And if you listen,
do you think he needs to answer that before he moves forward?
Well, that'll be up for Republicans to decide. What is their ultimate requirement of a next Speaker of the House? This is not an insignificant one.
Because many have told me it's irrelevant. I've said many tell me it's irrelevant.
Irrelevant to them. Well, it may be irrelevant to them, but it is clearly relevant to those who have yet to decide to support Jim Jordan as the potential next Speaker of the House. Like I said, it's not the only irritant, but it's not insignificant.
We know the former president has endorsed Jim Jordan. Want to take a listen to what the former president had to say today?
I think Jim will be Speaker of the House. He's a fantastic young man. He's pretty young still, and is very strong. He has very proper opinions about our country. He loves our country. He wants to see it do well, and I think he's going to be confirmed sometime soon.
I mean, Bob, as Jordan tries to find the votes, how much influence does the former president have right now? And do we know if he's making calls on Jordan's behalf?
I've heard that Trump has taken calls about Jordan, but the video you just saw tells the story. He's in New York, focused on his own civil case, the Trump organization facing a lot of scrutiny. He's not in the weeds here with congressional Republicans as they face off over this speaker vote. I mean, Trump's on the campaign trail. He's dealing with his legal challenges. Yes, he offered Jordan his endorsement, and Jordan got it, and Jordan's used that to his advantage to close the gap. But with a lot of these members, like the New York delegation, who are more moderate, the Trump endorsement, even though Trump's from New York, doesn't mean much because it doesn't help them in their districts.
Or what it means is more harmful than helpful. And there's also been behind-the-scenes grassroots pressure tactics on these members. And these membership votes, leadership votes, are deeply personal and intimate and face-to-face. Members of both parties deeply resent outside pressure campaigns, threatening primaries, other political damage if you don't get in lockstep. Look, we had a non-lockstep moment last week, engineered by hard-right Trump-influenced conservatives. Those who don't want to bow to those tactics now say, I remember what you did last week. I'm just doing what you did. Unless you come my way on my terms, I'm not going to budge.
And then just very briefly, because both of you have extensive reporting experience in Washington, how do we get out of this? How do House Republicans get out of this?
Well, briefly, I would say at the end of the day here, or at the end of the day tomorrow when they have this vote, if Jordan can't win on a second ballot, either Tom Emmer, the Minnesota Republican who's the majority whip, steps forward and says, it's now my turn and I'm the next in line, or they just move to a consensus pick like Patrick McHenry. And Patrick McHenry is now the Speaker pro tem. Could they give him limited powers for a few months? That's in the works as a possible deal. Or maybe he just stands forward outright as someone who's generally liked by Republicans. But I've covered House Republicans for a long time. I think about 10 years ago this week, they were having the government shut down in 2013. Who knows?
Very quickly, to go back to Julius Caesar, the knives that took out Kevin McCarthy are now turned to Jim Jordan or other Republicans. When Republicans start putting down the knives that they're pointing at each other and using to skewer one another and start deciding on how they want to govern as a team, this will end. But not until that happens.
All right, Major Garrett, Bob Costa, thanks for your expertise as always.